Rocky V takes things back to basics and quickly returns the Balboa family to the streets of Philadelphia, removing them from the lifestyle of the rich and famous. Buckle in for the stories of Tommy Gunn and Rocky Jr. as we discuss the movie that Sylvester Stallone rated a 0 out of 10. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
You touch me, I'll sue.
Home team, David. Home team. This is a movie podcast. We are working through the Rocky franchise, and today is the 5th entry in that franchise, the aptly named Rocky V. Because this was a time when they just numbered the movies, so there's nothing confusing until the next one.
Yeah.
But that's a different era, right? The next one's, nearly 30. Well, nah, there's not 30s because it was like 2006, so it's like.
Yeah, it just shows you that somewhere in the mid-90s, early 2000s, they made that change to realize, like, wait a minute, we can fool people into thinking that it's the first one if we don't put a number on it.
I've just had the really, distressing thought that it's been longer since Rocky Balboa than it was between Rocky V and Balboa, because it's only 16 years between V and Balboa.
And having not seen Balboa, I guarantee you that in it, they point out just how old he already is in there, which means he's doubly as old now.
Like, when Balboa came out, and it makes sense because I was in high school when it came out, but for some reason in my head, I just had it thinking, I was like, oh, it was a couple of years before Creed. It was right before Creed. That in my head, that's what my brain was doing, but it wasn't. It was a decade before Creed.
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
So
all right.
Long enough for the reboot cycle in Hollywood to kick in.
And that cycle keeps getting shorter and shorter.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're here to talk about Rocky V. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before spoilers, and of course, if you are liking the show, I'll just remind you, hit the like button on YouTube, helps us out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can get some bonus content from me, David, over on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. So we've been on a journey with Rocky. We had the award-winning intimate drama that is Rocky. We had the reasonable follow-up in Rocky 2. And we went into the 80s for a bit of silly fun with Rocky 3, and then turned that up to 11 with Rocky 4.
Yep.
And that brings
now we're in
us...
the 90s.
But I actually, do you know what? I thought this was 1989 until I put it on and noticed it said 1990, so just barely, right? We're just barely eked into the 90s. Notably, the first one that was made after I was born. Well, first one that was released after I was born. They were probably shooting it already.
Are you taking the blame for that? Is that what's going on here?
No,
you came into the world and all of a sudden Rocky is just like, oh, okay.
I'm just saying that there's so many franchises I like where all the good entries were before I was born. It's weird.
That's fair.
It's just weird, is all I'm saying. Obviously, it's just where my birth lines up with, because a lot of franchises lost steam at the end of the 80s, but still, that's not the point. So, yes. Rocky V. The premise of which is that, you know how in Spider-Man comics, every so often they realize that, oh no, wait, Spider-Man, Peter Parker's too successful, he's got too much money, and we like him being poor because that's what you think of when you think of Spider-Man. Well, we have to just quickly give a stupid reason as to why he's back to being poor Peter Parker. That is the premise of Rocky V. Rocky V is somehow he loses all of his money. We won't say how we'll save that for spoilers because I want to go on a rant about it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was rant-worthy.
He loses money, and we're doing the nostalgia trip. We're back on the same streets as the first movie. He puts on the same outfit. Adrian gets the same job that she had in the first one. It's like...
They kill their child. It's crazy.
Actually, the opposite in many ways. Well, not the opposite. The opposite would be they give birth to their child.
Yeah, they have another one. Yeah.
But... So here's the thing. Get into Rocky V. I had alluded in the prior reviews that Rocky V was the bad one. But I also did admit that I'd only seen it once, and it had been, probably since when I was in high school when I saw it. Right? That's when I think I went through all the Rocky movies back in the day.
Because that's when Balboa was coming out.
Yeah, probably, actually, yeah. I think I saw them not too long before Balboa. And I was like, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I remember. Maybe it's not great, but is it an actual stinker like other franchises have stinkers where you get to an entry and you're like, oh, this is the ugly duckling. This is the one that everyone derides for good reason. And I went into this with this kind of hopeful, okay, I'm expecting it to still be the worst one, but is it actually like a stinker? Is it going to actually achieve that in my mind? And I swear, by the 15-minute mark, I knew.
Yeah?
I knew. I was like, okay, the only thing I remember about this movie is like a vague visual of something towards the end, and just the general idea that somehow they're poor again. That was it. That was all I remembered. So everything with I always ask you first, so I'll save it for a second. David, this was your first time. What did you think of Rocky V?
Well, here's the thing. You kind of just did the exact same thing of, I have heard that this has been nothing but the bad one from you this entire time. So I'm going into this.
That doesn't sound like me.
No, you're always hopelessly positive about everything. But I've been sitting here and I'm like, okay, all right, this is going to be the worst one. This is going to be what it was. And when we got to it, when I finally sat down and I watched it, I will agree that it is the one that I think I enjoyed the least. That being said, it takes some swings and goes in directions that I actually kind of appreciate. I think that there is, like, don't get me wrong, execution is everything, and I think that a lot of the execution falls flat. But the idea of a back to basics Rocky movie rounding out the whole like series, I don't have a problem with. I think it's actually a pretty, I mean, obviously I don't think they intended to end the Rocky franchise here. Maybe they did. There's a little bit at the end that like hints it.
They kind of, there's a lot of bookend stuff, and then like the end credits plays out over stills of the 5 movies, kind of suggesting this is the goodbye kind of thing.
And I would agree to that if it weren't for the fact that Rocky IV also had a montage of going through all of the previous movies.
No, but that was different because that was in the middle of the movie to motivate what he does next. Very different. Totally
separate. Anyway, no, I think that this movie had some concepts and stuff that I really appreciate. I like the idea of a back to basics Rocky because, like you were saying, it's that Peter Parker thing. It's the thing of like, I mean, because me and you are both more into DC, it's how every single writer comes on and says, we're taking Batman back to basics, like every time. Every run begins with that now. And they never do. But regardless, it's got an okay concept for me. It really is just the sort of thing where, yeah, once we hit somewhere around like the 15-minute mark and we start like actually putting those plans into motion, we start getting there, the execution for me just falls flat. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I don't feel like it ever really answered that question by the time it got to the end of like what it was really trying to do the whole time. It had a bunch of different themes going on in terms of like Rocky taking Mick's place as like a trainer. It had different things of family going on and what that means to Rocky. It had the largest theme, I would say, is that it's tackling the idea of like corrupt promoters and stuff over the course of this and how everyone's just out to make a quick buck. There's a lot to cover, but it never felt like it was all one cohesive whole that delivered on some grand design that they wanted to wrap up with.
Yeah, I mean, where do I start? Like, some of the themes that they've got in here are fine, right? The idea with Rocky dealing with the fact that he can't fight anymore is obviously something that's worth tackling. It kind of shows that there's a cycle to this, because it's what Creed kind of went through, and to some extent, the idea that the end game for Rocky is to turn into Mickey for someone else also makes sense. It doesn't really happen, though, for another 25 or so years. Michael B. Jordan as his protege, thank you very much. But that's all fine and well, but the convoluted nature of getting them back to basics, as it were, and just how on the nose those back to basics are, with the same outfit, the same everything else, I see what they were trying to do with the relationship with his son, and we've been making fun of the movies for just kind of ignoring the son, but I miss them ignoring the son, because I think everything with this kid is borderline laughable, and just the way they handle it, the performance, not to make fun of Sage Stallone, who's now playing the son, although this I always remember there being an awkward, like, this doesn't make any sense time difference between movies, right, because this movie literally has them arriving back in the US from Russia from the end of 4, and all of a sudden the son is now like 12 or 13 or whatever age he is.
He's definitely pubescent. We get very strong confirmation of that soon afterwards.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, how did he age up like 5 years in the between movies? That doesn't make any sense, but okay, well.
No, I adore that. I love the fact that they just fully committed to like, yeah, we've been aging him up between movies in ways that don't make any sense. We're just going full tilt now because we have a story we want to tell, but he has to be at the angsty age in order to tell that story.
I swear, in Rocky Balboa, I was surprised he didn't show up at Mickey's age, despite the fact that Rocky was still alive.
I know. I totally wanted him to show up, just like as older than Rocky, be like, "Hey, Dad."
So yeah, all that stuff I do not particularly like. I think the plot that revolves around a new character that Rocky's going to train, I think is kind of rough, partially because the character. Like I obviously part of the point is that he's not like a great person, right? I get that, but every place it goes, it just feels like, well, there has to be some kind of fight at the end, even though he can't box anymore. So we're going to like contrive this to happen, kind of thing. I think the build up to a lot of what actually happens just doesn't really feel like it gets there naturally. And there's a lot of forced moments to make things happen. It really honestly feels like a series of bad ideas. And apparently Stallone agrees with me because he has been on record as saying that he thinks Rocky 5 is a 0 out of 10 and he hates it. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that gets me the most is that back in the first review, we kept on saying like, oh man, it's really nice that like this movie doesn't have a villain. It barely even has an antagonist. It's just a guy trying to get by, and like everyone's just trying to get by. And they continued that up probably, you could say, until 3 or 4, depending on your definition of villain. But even looking at both those movies, yes, they are a lot more cold. Clubber Lang and Ivan Drago, they're a lot more rough and angry, but ultimately they are still just doing their thing of like they're boxing and they're just boxers. That's how they are programmed to work. This is, I think, the first movie that is a actual honest to God villain of Duke, where he is just the worst, like the scheming, slimy guy who does it for all the wrong reasons.
Duke?
Is that not Duke? I thought it was George Washington Duke. Is that not his name?
What?
You know, there's 2 characters named Duke in this movie.
That
I'm just
Duke.
realizing.
Oh, I didn't know his name was Duke. I thought you were talking about Apollo's trainer. I was like, what are you talking about? Him being a villain? What are you talking about?
Man, that would have been the best heel turn of all time. Are you kidding me?
Oh no, I'd have hated that because I like him. Yeah. Well, he's not necessarily the problem though. The problem is Tommy.
Oh yeah, no, but he's the one who's like instigating and pushing Tommy, and like you said, I don't think that Tommy he's a rough character in a lot of ways, but I think that's mainly like he doesn't get enough characterization. We basically are just told through other things that he is Rocky 2. He's just the next Rocky. That's all that he is, and so we're just meant to infer all that.
I would argue that that's actually completely the opposite of what they tell us almost every chance they get.
Oh, yeah, no, by the end of the movie, for sure. And also that one scene towards the beginning. But I think that in the middle bit, the entire point of his character arc in this movie is to say Rocky is special because other people would have succumbed to the sins of fame and popularity and whatnot, whereas Rocky has this heart and he's able to resist all of those evil ways. That's where we see Tommy is just meant to be that dark reflection of Rocky in that way.
Yeah. What I mean, though, is I think it's pretty painfully clear in almost every scene that he interacts with anyone that isn't Rocky that he's not the next Rocky. He is... Oh, yeah. Everyone else can see that he's not the next Rocky. But, I mean, I have no problem with the idea that showing that Rocky is special because he does have that heart, because that's what makes Rocky likable and appealing and, you know, what's always made him work. I just don't enjoy watching any of this Tommy stuff at all. I think it's tedious to sit through... because it's all there to set up something, and because he feels like he's very one-dimensional, two-dimensional, I'll say, but he's not three-dimensional is the point. He's a very two-dimensional character, and like the red flags are there, and I almost do actually begrudge Rocky for not like having more problems with some things that he even says very early on in the movie, which are painfully kind of like, that's a bit weird to bring up at the dinner table, but all right, we'll get back to that. Right?
Dinner table scene was very weird, but you know, he's a quirky guy. He had a rough upbringing. Got to cut him some credit.
So I just there's too many things in this movie I just don't enjoy. Like, in fact, I enjoy basically almost none of it. Like, I think the Tommy stuff is rough, even though I understand the point they're trying to get across. It just doesn't really work that well. I think all the stuff with Rocky's kid, well, a fine idea, the idea that Rocky's kid is jealous that Rocky's more obsessed with someone else. Every single time it shows you his sad little face as he's jealous is just borderline embarrassing, and like, you know, in that way where I started laughing a couple of times because I'm like, oh, okay, this is just kind of silly. But I think one of the big problems is, and it's actually kind of weird because the movie kind of like ages him up as the movie goes on in terms of personality. But at the start of the movie, he has absolutely been treated too young. Like he's acting too young. He's been treated like he's an 8-year-old still. But then
Stallone keeps doing this thing of pulling money out of his ear, and I'm like, bro, that is 6-year-old. Like, that's last Rocky. That's the last movie. You don't do that now.
But he's treated far too young. But then later on, he's now he's with rough inner city kids. He's changed significantly.
He's smoking,
right? So that's a whole thing. And then, you know, like, I mean, what else do you? I mean, Paulie arguably has better things to do in this than the last couple of movies. I mean, I'll maybe give him that,
dude. I mean, you say that, but I feel like every single time Paulie says anything, it's basically just him being like, I shouldn't have to be here for this. And I agree with him. Like, he's every single time he talks, he's just like, this is beneath me. I shouldn't even be here. And I'm like, you know, Paulie, I don't like you as a character much at all, but you're right. Like, you shouldn't be here.
Yeah, but I feel that way about every character in this movie.
I mean, that's fair. What you were saying earlier, though, is like you don't mind the dark reflection of Rocky thing, and
I don't mind that as a concept.
Like seeing the heart and whatnot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying is that I like the concept here. I like these. If you put it on just like a cork board and say, "Here's the theme that we're going with," I'd say, "Yeah, that sounds like a great theme. You could do that." But it's the moment we get introduced to these characters and the way they're portrayed and the way they're written that I lose all interest in them. I just cannot bring myself to care.
Yeah, so it's bad. Ah, yes, we agree.
No, I'm not saying it's good. Absolutely. For sure.
It's bad. The execution, if the execution isn't there, it doesn't work, then it doesn't matter how good the idea is to an extent. It's caught in this weird middle ground because they've got the original director back. They want to go back to basics to give this sort of bookend to what was meant to be the end of the franchise. But it just, you can't really just go back to that though after the last couple of movies. It just feels weird. It's not fun anymore. And like the very first shot of this movie after the opening titles, which is them replaying the final fight of the last movie, is this cold shot of Stallone naked in the shower with his hands up against the tiles, clearly in pain and like contemplating life. And I'm like, this is not the same character as the last movie. Which, by the way, I do have to point this out because we have been sort of tracking the performance of Stallone and how much he is like Rocky 1 throughout the movies. The second this movie starts, he's talking like Rocky from Rocky 1. Like, I would have understood the intent if, like, once he's back in, like, the streets of Philadelphia and he's with people that he knew before, in the same way that when someone who's moved away from their home country or whatever goes back and their accent kind of comes back out, I would have accepted that, he starts sort of acting and talking like Rocky from Rocky 1 again. But he's acting like that before any of that even happens. He's just acting like Rocky from Rocky 1 again.
I'm going to go ahead and just go with my earlier theory. I can't remember where I said it, but my earlier theory of he got hit in the head so hard by Apollo Creed in the first movie that, like, it got his brain jumbled to where he actually started behaving like Sylvester Stallone. And then now in Rocky 4, Ivan Drago punched him so hard it put him back into Rocky 1 mode.
I mean, I don't like that as a genuine, like, plot reason.
No, of course it's not an actual theory.
But, you know, it's fine. Actually, what's funny is that, so this promoter character you kind of mentioned before, who you confusingly referred to as Duke.
His name is George Washington Duke, and to be honest, Apollo's trainer shows up in exactly 2 shots of this movie.
Yeah, but but the difference is, though, is I remember his name from previous movies. I never got this guy's name, right? He was saying it. He's like a Pokemon. He was saying his own name every time he showed up. He's like, "This is George Washington Duke here." Doesn't matter. The point is that his name, the actor's name, is Richard Gant. And what's so funny is I've seen him in a bunch of stuff. He's one of those like character actors who pops up in a lot of stuff. He's got a very good presence. But I actually thought for a long time, I just read it as Richard Grant, and I thought it was funny that there's another guy named Richard Grant, because there's also an English actor named Richard Grant.
Right.
But it's not Richard Grant, it's Richard Gant. And that is the most interesting thought I had in the entirety of this movie.
Got me there, yeah.
So, yeah, just call him George. If you have to call him a name, call him George, but I'm going with the promoter.
I mean, yeah, that'll be fine. I'll say it.
Yeah, I don't even, like, it's a forced, contrived movie where all of the sentiment is completely hampered by just nonsensical plot developments, things that just don't quite work. It feels forced and it feels thin, in the same way that a nostalgia sequel from today honestly kind of feels. It's actually very much reminding me of something that, we have to keep referencing the original Ghostbusters because all we're here to do is remind you. Remember Ghostbusters? Remember what we were all like in that movie? Well, that's what this movie is for Rocky. Rocky's like, hey, remember when me and Adrian first met? Here's those glasses you were wearing. Put them on so I can take them off again. Like, just stupid ass moments like that.
I agree. I 100% agree. I do wonder if this movie could have worked in a world where Rocky 4 wasn't as out there as it was. Because I think that is part of the problem here, is that every movie kept building in ridiculousness, and it got to such a critical mass with Rocky 4 of how crazy it ended up getting, to the point where when this movie is recapping Rocky 4 at the beginning of it, they just skip the ending monologue of the all the Russian people standing up and clapping for Rocky because they realize that was probably a bit much.
The tone at the end of Rocky 4 and the tone at the start of Rocky 5 do not match at all.
Yeah. But that's why I'm wondering if there is a world where Rocky 4 is a little bit less. It didn't quite go as high. Would this be a bit more reasonable as a follow-up? Still not saying it's a good movie, but at least it feels like the same universe. Because again, like you said, the first shot of this being him in a cold Russian shower, clearly on the verge of dying, pretty much. It doesn't flow. You're just like, what the hell did I just walk into? This is some dark timeline where everything is wrong with Rocky.
I mean, it would probably make it feel less like Whiplash. I don't think it would fix it into a good movie, because I think it is just fundamentally, it's just fundamentally flawed with the new characters it has, and I'm including his son in that. I know he technically was around before, but this is the first time he's been a character.
No. Those other kids were Rocky Juniors. This is Robert.
Oh, okay.
He introduces himself as Robert, so therefore, totally different character for me.
Having said that, when Rocky gets off to play at the start, he still yells out, "Where's the kid? Yo, kid! Where's kid?" I don't think
he ever says his name one time in the whole movie. He's always kid.
Oh, jeez. Bill Conti's back doing the music, which, obviously it's nice to hear some of it, but it comes in. There's a couple of moments where it comes in at a weird point and feels like there's actually something towards the end where, because I do think the scene itself is really forced and silly, that when the music comes in like it's meant to be the inspirational moment, it just made me roll my eyes and laugh. So
it even does a overlay of Stallone's face coming up into frame, and it's so dumb looking. I will say a lot of the music in this, they hit the 90s hard. They took that hip hop beat and all the drum and bass stuff, and they brought it in to the point where the original Rocky theme, once it starts playing, has a drum and not the Gonna Fly Now, or yes, the Gonna Fly Now song. It has this backing beat to it now that makes it feel much more 90s, and it just immediately feels wrong. It upsets something deep inside me.
Yeah, it's funny. You're right, it is 90s, but what was making me think of more was because there's a montage in the middle with a hip-hop song playing, and it made me think of Ghostbusters 2, which was 1989, and how they had the Run DMC version of the Ghostbusters song, and that played in the middle of that, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is just of the era. This is 1 year later, it's that same type of hip-hop. Obviously this isn't the Ghostbusters theme, although I wish it was the Rocky theme, but done as hip-hop, because it's not, it's just a hip-hop song.
If somebody could do a really cool hip-hop mix of that, early 90s feel, that would sound awesome. That would be incredible. But no, it's just the theme with a little bit of a backing beat to it
Yeah.
every once in a while. And not the one you're talking about. Yours is an original song.
Yeah, it's an actual song. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's especially since the last movie focused so much on its soundtrack. It's wild that the music, the songs in this are just feel like an afterthought, to be honest, in comparison.
Yeah, and then the weirdest part is like, I don't spoil anything, but the ending, like playing you off in the credits of all things, is an Elton John song.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
Like, oh, you spend the entire movie with hip hop, and it's like, all right, and now Sir Elton John.
All right, let's just say spoilers then for Rocky 5. You have been warned, and we'll see what we can do here. So as we said, movie opens with the sort of the replay of the final fight of Rocky 4. Although the tone of even the replay is different because they intentionally edit it in with the music and the way it freeze frames all the time and cuts to like reactions like of Adrian and stuff. They're definitely making it feel more like, oh, this was a serious fight at the end of the last movie where like the lives were on the line and all the rest of it. The tone is completely different. And when it gets to like the first real scene and he's in that shower and he's like, clearly thing, and our boy Duke gets his one scene, which is that he's packing some stuff in a bag and he's like, yo, champ, you all right, champ? And he's like, get Adrian, I don't feel so good, right?
I mean, he will say, like, he's fist pumping. He's like, you would have made Apollo proud. Like, he's all happy. He's all smiles. And that's, as soon as he calls out, he's like, get Adrian in here. He's like, oh, okay. Yeah, bye. And he just leaves. Gone from the movie.
Adrian comes in and Rocky's hands are shaking. And it's like, okay, he's been injured. He's been hit in the head one too many times. And that'll set some stuff up for a little bit later.
I do appreciate the fact that every movie has been building up. They say, like, okay, Apollo in the first movie, he was just kind of messing around. He wasn't training well. He was the weakest person. And then Apollo, after training, next step up. Clubber Lang, next step up. And then Ivan Drago, literally everyone was like, he is a murder machine. He will just kill you. So it's nice to see that Rocky didn't make it out of that fight just completely unscathed. Like, there were actually consequences on, like, every other fight coming up to this.
See, I see what you're saying, but again, tonally, it just doesn't fit.
Oh, no, totally. If you're coming out of, like, if you immediately did a movie marathon and you went Rocky 4 into Rocky 5, you would hate this, no doubt. I have no, like, it is the worst transition period between two movies I've ever seen.
It feels awful. Watching, like, I'm sure it's still bad when you watch, like, 5 years later, this would have been from 4, but watching it a week later, it's like, oh, geez, like, this just does not feel right at all.
Well, it's especially because that's something I had a thought of back with like Rocky 3. Once I realized that every movie was going to be showing the previous fight at the beginning, I was thinking, okay, well, how hard would it be to do like a supercut where you just take the fight and then roll it right into the next one? And like you don't even have like the end credits. You just watch each one as if it was one long continuous story. This would be the point where I think that would break. Like it just absolutely would shatter the illusion of like, nah, these are two completely different movies.
I mean, I don't know for sure. It's been a while since I've watched it, but I'm pretty confident that Rocky Balboa does not open with the street fight for 5.
Well, considering Sylvester Stallone disowned it, I'm pretty sure they would just show the Ivan Drago fight again and be like, yep, that's the last thing that happened.
It's so funny because, like, from a continuity perspective, you kind of have to watch 5 at least once to understand, like, why things have changed so much for Balboa. That said, he has found some success in Balboa doing something else, but like, I mean, I suppose you could just sort of headcanon it and say, oh, eventually, he moved back to the city because he wanted to be there, because that's his home, and he gave up the mansion, just to explain that, because everything else doesn't matter, right?
Right, yeah,
doesn't
absolutely.
Matter. So,
what happened to the robot? That's what I want to know. Even with this movie, what happened to the robot?
Well, when they lose their fortune, they sell off all their expensive motorbikes, so I assume the robot got sold off in that whole flurry.
That was Rocky's stuff. Paulie got to keep his robot.
It's Paulie's fault!
It is. It absolutely is.
So they get back in the plane. We get introduced to the new son, who is somehow 5 years old, despite it being a week later or whatever it is.
Yeah. We also get the in-universe Rocky theme playing again.
Yes, that's right.
That's just playing the full brass.
And, Rocky goes up to do the press conference. They're all waiting for him. They're asking him questions. and they start asking about, whatever, right? But then the promoter character, right, Richard Gant's character is introduced here, and he comes in just stealing like the show from everyone, and he'd be like, "Oh, here's my competitor. This is my number one contender. He wants a fight with Rocky Balboa." And he starts like,
The promoter literally comes in with a microphone hooked up to the sound system. I don't know how the hell he managed that, but good on him.
See, in his line of business, he knows how to grease some palms of the tech guys so that he's got the access, you see.
Yeah.
But he comes up to the stage and he basically makes it clear that he wants his contender to challenge Balboa as a big sort of money fight. He's here to make money. That's clear from this first scene. He's got a bit of a sleazy vibe to him. And Balboa just kind of dodges the questions and makes a joke about the plane ride and like, you're probably wondering how the plane ride was. It was all right,
Well, that was Adrian pops up after hearing this guy basically call out the Rocky saying, "Hey, you gonna fight or not?" And she just steals the mic and says, "Excuse me, my husband's retired. He will not be fighting anymore." And that's when all of a sudden this one just absolute jackass of a reporter is just like, "Well, now hold on, Rocky. We need some answers now. We as the public are owed an answer. Are you going to fight this guy after you just got off a Russian plane not 30 minutes prior? Tell us, Rocky."
Yeah, Rocky just doesn't answer. He doesn't even say he'll tell them later. He just kind of
He's just like, gotta think about it. Bye.
Yeah. So that's some sprinklings of setup. But it's like, okay, he's back home. We reestablish his relationship with his son because we've barely had one in the previous movies.
You say reestablish. I think this is just establishing.
Sure. In theory, it should be reestablished, but we are where we are. And he kisses the son goodnight. He's like pulling the crown out from behind his ear. It's all these stuff that's really kiddie. Of course, the one thing that's maybe indicating to Rocky that his son is perhaps growing up a little bit is that when he looks through his son's drawings, because apparently his son's a bit of an artist, and we see later on he's seemingly all right because he does some good sketches later on. But he lifts up like what's others at the top of the pile, and underneath he's like, "Whoa, who is this?" And he turns it around. And this is actually almost funnier in hindsight because we see how good he is at drawing people later, because he does like a sketch of Rocky and Uncle Paulie later, and it's like a pretty good sketch of someone who knows how to draw. This is like just this like simplistic cartoon of a woman, except the tits are like 5 times the size of her head. And Rocky's like, "Whoa, who's this?" And he's like, "Oh, that's my French teacher, Mrs. So-and-so.
Yeah, Miss Dupont."
And he's like, "Oh, I don't know French. Maybe not show your mother this because, she doesn't do so well with French." Which is a slightly funny line. Like, that was a mainly funny line. I'll give him that. And then the kid also throws out towards the end of the conversation as well that, "Oh, my English teacher's really hot as well." I'm like, all right, kid, calm down.
Yeah. Look, I got joy out of this scene specifically because everything leading up to this, like you said, like they were treating the kid like he was 8. Like he was like way too young. His dad is tucking him into bed and he doesn't have like any angst at all. And he just enjoys his like drawings and whatnot.
To be fair,
and then all of a sudden lift up this portrait and it's just tits. And it's like, oh, okay, sure.
And I do want to point out, to be fair, that he is also acting like he's 8 for the most part here as well. Like he's being receptive to all of this stuff. He's speaking to his father like he's 8 years old. The only thing that indicates that he's actually older than that is that he likes the boobs. That's it. That's the only thing that indicates that in any way. Obviously things change as the movie goes on, but that's where we are.
I feel like this is a directorial thing more than an acting choice. I feel like he was told, like, look, you're going to play innocent at the beginning, so that way it's going to contrast when you get more angsty and angry towards the end. But it just came off as a bit too innocent. It like he needed to have a little bit of teenagerdom still here. Yeah, instead of just being a child.
He should already, like, not hate, but, be a teen towards his dad.
Like, he can admire his dad. He can say, like, yeah, my dad is the heavyweight champion of the world. Like, that's a cool thing to say. That's fine. But he needs to have, like, those social cues. He needs to have the idea of, like, trying to seem like he's cool and whatnot, because that's what all those teenagers are concerned about.
The way he comes begging for attention multiple times in this movie just feel like, you're a bit too old for this.
I do wonder how, obviously this is all in-universe stuff, and they should, like, it doesn't matter for the performance, but I do wonder how much of that is just Adrian sheltering him for his entire life. Because she does strike me as the type of mom that would do that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's what they're going for. Maybe they're going for he's a late bloomer because he's taken after his mum's shyness.
Yeah.
And then obviously he's thrown into the deep end by going back to the mean streets of Philly, and then his like inner fighter comes out. Or so, I don't know.
Yeah, he gets on his dad's genes, just come busting out.
But honestly, the problem with every scene that Rocky and Rocky Jr. have is that it just comes across as too kind of silly. It feels like Rocky's borderline a caricature of himself because he's talking to his kid like this, even though he's this age. And then the kid is playing it up so innocent, like you said, that it just doesn't come across as like a real relationship. It feels just fabricated in every way, which is funny because this is actually father and son playing together. Right. You would think they'd have some father and son chemistry.
You'd think so. I wonder how present Stallone is as a dad. I don't, I'm not saying that what he is now or whatever, but, back in the 80s, he was constantly filming movies, so I wonder how much he was actually even around stage for that much.
I don't know. I mean, it depends. I mean, sometimes actors will intentionally take movies that are shooting near home so they don't have to be away from their family. Sometimes they'll even have like their families come and stay like for like a while wherever they're shooting a movie, depending on what's going on.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. You'd have to ask Sage Stallone.
Well, that's going to be a problem.
Oh, is he dead?
Yes, he's dead.
Okay,
That's 2012.
There's two tragic deaths from actors in this movie then.
Yeah.
Because the boxer dude who so Tommy, the actor playing him, is a real boxer, and he died in, I want to say 2013. So
it's on the Wikipedia page, but I don't see it immediately. But yeah,
so around the same time, or maybe it was 2003. Maybe I'm off by a decade. It ended in 03, but he got HIV in the 90s, and that kind of led to his career.
2013.
Ending.
There it is.
Okay, cool. So yeah, all right. I mean, after this scene though is where the movie just starts driving down the left side of the, like, just takes a turn, just takes a sharp left turn, and we hear an argument. Right, Rocky comes out of the bedroom and overhears an argument between Polly and Adrian is pissed, and I'm like, what's she pissed about? And she's yelling about money, and as we hear more and more snippets of the conversation, it becomes clear that Polly, for some reason, had complete access and control to the entire Rocky Balboa, like, income and fortune, right?
Yeah.
And he apparently signed something over to an accountant, which turned out to be complete power of attorney, and that accountant tried to invest the money to make money off of it and thought he'd put it back without anyone noticing, because he'd make his profit and put whatever he took back, and no one's the wiser. Except, oh no, it didn't pan out. He lost all the money. They're now getting nothing. And I'm just Polly. Right?
Yeah.
Rocky Balboa was successful enough that he became rich and got a mansion. He got fancy cars, motorbikes, had enough to live uber life of luxury with his wife and son for the rest of his life. And Polly pisses it all away. And Rocky never even seems to even show a shred of anger at him.
Well, that's the thing. He's upset at the situation. Like, he hates that it happened, but somehow he comes out of it blaming himself instead of like the clear person who did it.
Look, it's funny because by the end of the movie, obviously you kind of just forget it because the movie forgets about it, and the movie doesn't care that Polly is like kind of not a villain, but like this would be unforgivable if someone like lost all of your savings, which you were expecting to live off. I don't think you could forgive them. I don't think I could be friends with that person anymore.
I mean, again, the movie doesn't deal with it, but it's not even so much of like, oh, I did a money transfer and it went bad or whatever. They took all the money. It's full power of attorney. And let me tell you, I've seen enough like YouTube law cases and stuff like that to know that if you give full power of attorney to someone, it's not something that's just easily undone. That's not something that you could just say, you go to the court and you'd be like, actually, I'd like to revoke that. Like, nah, man, he's got power of attorney. He can tell you to sit down and shut up. Like, it's a bad thing Paulie did. And there is no possible way that this movie ends in a realistic setting without Paulie being absolutely gone from Philadelphia unless Rocky beat the crap out of him the first time he sees him.
Yeah, I mean, the only justification that they're still even associating with them is that Paulie still owns his place from the first movie, which is where they all end up living, and they just need a place to stay. But even then, there should be tension in the air. But obviously, 10 minutes later, it feels like, oh, everything with Paulie's just the same as it always is. He's just sitting there with his cigar, he cracks some lines, and Rocky just puts up with it. And it's like, no. He's always been a bit of a troublemaker who's been like a pain in your life, and you're a saint for even putting up with them. This is like monumental what he has done. He has ruined your financial life.
You remember at the beginning of Rocky IV where Paulie spent the night in jail and Rocky had to go get him out?
I do recall, yes.
And then, like, we had that long conversation about, like, oh, God, what is Paulie even doing? Like, why does he keep him around if he's just, like, this much of a dick all the time? And then this happens the moment that, like, they get back from Russia and Rocky is, like, having to retire from severe complications of having his head bashed in. Like, I don't see any world where, first off, I mean, even since Rocky 1, I don't see any world where I hang out with Paulie at all.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Even at this point now, taking the brotherhood of growing up in Philly together, I still don't see any world where I would associate with Paulie.
So here's the thing. All these complaints we've just made are all in-universe. This is all the in-universe. This feels wrong that Rocky doesn't react. Like, yeah, Adrian's pissed at him at first, but she seems to be fine with him for the rest of the movie. She should hate him forever after this. But it's not obviously... I'm not going to blame Paulie as a character per se, because this isn't something that naturally Paulie was going to do based on the previous movies. Right. This is a forced, quick solution to how do we make Rocky poor, and this is what Stallone as a writer came up with. And that is the real crime here, is that they basically threw this character, who, again, I don't love Paulie as a character, but they basically character assassinated him in the sense that anyone with a brain's going to look at him like, what you've done here is unforgivable, and it's unrealistic that anyone wants to be around you ever again. But because they don't actually want to treat him that way with the script, they just want this to be an easy excuse as to why, okay, we're back in Philly, and Rocky's going to get nostalgic and put on his old hat and his leather jacket, and like even that obviously is again steps too far. But it's a whole thing.
Absolutely. It also is kind of a weird thing where obviously they picked Paulie to be the person who does this because he has been the one who's been incompetent up till this point. He's been the one who has had these sort of bouts with not successfully doing things. But that only makes it all the worse for Rocky as a character in that he trusted Paulie with this incredible power of being able to give away power of attorney, which just makes him look all the more stupid as well. So yeah, it's poor writing beginning to end. Like, there's no reason to have had Paulie for him to have had this ability to give it away in the first place. And they just said it had to be that or else the plot wouldn't happen. And
again, I just want to emphasize everything we are talking about here about the characters and it not making sense and it being bad writing from a character perspective, all completely true and valid. But the biggest sin of it is that this decision was not made because it wanted to do something with either Rocky or Paulie's character. It was made as a quick fix to just get Rocky and Co where they wanted them to be, and that's it. And it was done with complete disregard for what it actually should have for consequences.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the like comic book example we were saying before, whenever they want to take away like Peter's happiness or Batman's money or whatever like that, there's a story arc that's devoted to like, how do we get there? We got to set this up and we got to like get to the point where this needs to be taken away. This is like 3 pages at the beginning of a book saying like, and then this happened, moving on.
I don't know. I'd say it's 50-50. I feel like half the time it just happens very quickly in the last issue of an arc for the next writer to take over.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like it's always set up throughout the story, and then it's that last issue that like they flip a coin to say, all right, does he do the FEC or whatever manage to give him his money back, or do they just say, nope, it's gone now?
Ah, dear. So we're back in Philadelphia, where Rocky was born and raised, and on the boxing ring he spent most of his days.
I don't know if he's from West Philly.
I never said he was from West Philly.
No, I'm just saying. I know Philly's a big place. I just don't know specifically where in Philly he's from.
Nor do I. Nor do I. So, I mean, yeah, like the whole thing is just kind. I think that's the other thing is that you come out, and this is going back to you're coming off the high of like the silliness of Rocky IV and it being this big heroic we stopped the Cold War ending. Is that this is just all so miserable. Like there's nothing like happy or fun about any of this.
Yeah,
it's
you're
miserable.
Like, I think one of the very next things that happens after, like, they have a meeting with some higher ups or whatever, and like money managers, and they're claiming how, they explain the whole situation. The guy took the money, real estate, blah, blah, blah. And Rocky is basically told, like, look, you have to go and fight some more if you want some quick money. Like, there's no way that we can get your money back eventually, maybe, but right now there's nothing we can do, and you're going to have to sell everything.
They do specifically say as well that, like, look, couple of fights. That's all it'll really take to get you back in more or less the same standing that you had before. Because you're a former world champion, you're a big fan favorite, you'll get paid for a couple of big fights and it'll be over. But of course, Adrian's like, no, you were physically like shaking after that last fight. And she says, look, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says it's okay, I'll be fine with it. But I'm not saying it's okay unless you go do that. And, he hugs her and says, okay, I'll do it for you. And they go to the doctor and, cut to like a brain scan. And he's like, yeah, so this is a condition that's unique to boxers. To put it in layman's terms, your brain is screwed. So you cannot fight ever again.
I love the way that they say, because they use like all the mumbo jumbo, they use like the Latin words or whatever. And then they basically just boiled it down to be like, you've got what's essentially a long-term concussion and you are never going to be able to fight again. And Rocky just is like, all right, so how bad is it? And it's like, it's bad, Rocky. It's real bad.
I'm a fighter. I need to fight so we can get our money back, so we can have a nice life. And, I guess this is the moment that kind of in a weird way lets Polly off the hook, because she grabs him and says, I don't care about the money, Rocky. All I care about is you. And, and then in parenthesis, also the kid. But she never says that. Yeah. It's just implied.
I love you, Rocky, and Rocky Jr., but mostly Rocky.
So, yeah, like, that sets it up. They're back in Philadelphia. He's back
sold all their stuff at an estate sale.
Yeah, he's back in his outfit. He's walking the streets, says hello to a few people. And we get our next big gratuitous nostalgia thing, which is him getting into Mickey's gym, which they own because it was left in the will specifically to Rocky Jr., which is an interesting little wrinkle there, but okay.
I feel like that has to be some sort of weird tax dodge. Like if he gave it to like someone over 18, then they have to pay property taxes. But if it goes to the kid, well, they're not going to see a red cent.
I feel like it was more just a symbolic thing. It's it's just for your kid down the line. But so they own that, and obviously Rocky is going to open it. And I mean, I don't know how much money a gym makes. I assume they all pay a membership to come and use it. So that's where he gets his.
It definitely depends on how good and popular the gym is. I have a feeling that
it looked
based
pretty,
on what we
it looked pretty busy later on when he's got it running.
Yeah, what we see, I have a feeling that it's successful enough where they're not hurting for money based off their current situation. Like they can live pretty comfortably where they're at.
Yeah. Plus, all you have to do is market it as this is a gym run by the world champion who's also the hometown hero. I feel like it will be popular amongst the boxing crowd for that reason.
Wasn't that in Rocky 3? Didn't they have him training at like a specific gym that had all the Rocky memorabilia?
No. It wasn't a gym. It was what do you call it? The area in the hotel that you can sort of rent out for like events.
Oh, like a conference room sort of thing.
They basically just converted a conference room into like a merchandise-filled training area.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, to be fair, Paulie is trying to do that. The next time that we see the gym,
that's true.
He's selling a cup, and he's like, "This was actually used by Rocky." And the guy's like, "How do I know you're not lying to me?" And he's like, "See the lip marks on it?" He's like, "All right, fair enough, $5."
These boxers aren't too bright because
no.
I mean, maybe the next question should have been, "How do I know that's Rocky's lips?"
Paulie just gets up, walks over next to Rocky, puts it next to his face, says, "See, there, they match."
See, you joke, but I could actually see Paulie doing that.
Like,
with a straight face, because he's Paulie. So, yeah, we get this scene. And I did notice that in the opening titles, it did come up saying Burgess Meredith, and I went, hold on a minute.
Now, wait a minute, something doesn't line up here, timeline-wise.
Hold on just one darn minute. So we get this scene where Rocky's in the gym, and it's obviously clearly not been open in at least 5 years because there's just stuff flying about, and it's a mess. And he looks over to the boxing ring, and he has the emotional flashback where he sees him and Mickey training from Rocky 1, and they were smart enough here to kind of just never really show young Rocky's face too much, just so that you couldn't tell it was, it was Stallone at the same age. It was like, we'll Mickey looks the same because, 72 to 82 is about the same, so whatever. But
yeah. Stallone would have to get his wig back for his 70s, like, wheel in his face stuff, and they didn't want to bother with it.
And it's basically explaining that Mickey gave Rocky the little boxing glove like necklace that he has, which to be fair was in at least the last movie because I remember seeing it. So it wasn't just something they pulled out their ass for this one.
I think I saw somewhere it was in 3 and 4.
Yeah, okay.
So it wasn't there from the beginning because this is saying he gave it to him right before his first fight with Apollo. So that doesn't make any sense timeline wise, but fair enough.
Yeah, I'll headcanon it. He didn't feel like he'd earned the right to wear it until he won the title.
Sure, I'll take it.
There you go.
My greater problem with the movie is like they're talking about this of, it's Mick and he's really opening up to Rocky. He's saying like all of these fatherly things and like how much he loves him and all this stuff.
That was not Mickey at all in that first movie.
No, it was not, man. Mickey was told him like, you're a bum, get out of my gym.
I think he's trying to sort of retcon that he did get kind of open and emotional right before the end. Right before the fight, that is. But it kind of felt like in Rocky 2, though, like the first time he got proper, like, open with them was that moment in the chapel, in the hospital. That's where he kind of opened up finally. So they're kind of almost ruining that a little bit in retrospect by saying, hey, this happened before the Rocky 1 fight. A little bit, not like in a major way, but...
I mean, I'm fine with Mickey being open. I'm fine with him having these moments of vulnerability. It just, like, from Rocky 2 and Rocky 3, it happens a lot more. Rocky 1, he is a hard ass. Like, there's no place... They should have basically said that this took place during the training montage of Rocky 2.
Of him
trying to get him up. Like, that would have made sense.
Yeah, that would have made more sense. Yeah, because obviously a big thing in this movie is that Rocky is going to really latch on... Not immediately, he's a bit resistant at first, of course, but he does kind of latch on to Tommy and this idea that he can live vicariously through a new young boxer, which is kind of what Mickey was doing with Rocky. And it's kind of like, okay, if I'm now the Mickey, I need my Rocky, and maybe this guy's my Rocky. And that's kind of what he's doing. And obviously this makes young Rocky Jr. jealous because he's been ignored, especially when he tries to actually ask his dad about things, or they say, hey, I met a girl today, Dad. And he's like, oh, that's great, champ. I'm busy with Tommy right now, though. And this is like a running thing. And obviously there's that whole living through, because he can't have the glory himself anymore, so he's living through Tommy. But I do want to point out, to be fair to the movie, it does at least make a point of saying that Stallone does, or I should say Rocky does, actually try and sort of like meet his son in his own interests. He praises his drawings. Like he seems to try and like do that properly and be a nice dad in that sense. Like there's no points are lost for effort in terms of before the Tommy part of the timeline.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to a matter of quantity of like time spent between the two of them rather than quality. Like he is a good father. He does care about his son. It's not like he's openly neglectful, but it is a thing where he gets so absorbed in this new living vicariously through someone else that he just lets things slip. He just starts missing out on things.
Yeah, and that'll never be son in this role because, him and Adrian had decided a long time ago that he will not solve his problem with his fists. He will be a smart kid, and
yes,
that's what they're trying to do. And they really sell that that he sees the kid as smarter than him. And I mean, that's probably somewhat true.
I mean, it's absolutely true. There is a bit later on, and we'll get to it because it's character development for Rocky Jr., but like, you say that he has to not solve his problems with his fist. I don't feel like they care that much about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they say early on, though, is what I'm getting at. Yeah, like they kind of say that that's where it's going. And we almost get like a spiteful training from him because he kind of trains on his own, or well, he trains with a little bit with Paulie, and then a little bit with some other guy that's just like a red shirt.
It felt like they just like wanted to have Mickey again, but they're like, all right, so we can't have him because he's dead. So we're just going to cast another old dude who is clearly of Irish descent. Cool.
Yes.
There it is.
Yeah, he just sort of trains in spite whilst Rocky's training Tommy. So he's in the same gym and he's like, see, Dad, I'm punching the punching bag. Notice me. Notice me.
Daddy, please.
Which, I suppose that leads us nicely into, it probably works well to just stick with Rocky Jr. for some stuff for a bit.
Okay.
Because, early scene, Rocky's walking him to school, and it's brought up, right, that he is a little bit nervous. He admits that he's nervous because, he went to a rich kid's school because Rocky was a rich dad, right? So he didn't go to a public school in the city, and maybe he's a bit nervous about that. And very quickly, it does establish that, yes, he immediately gets bullied. Two kids, push him down and steal his coat and say, oh, your dad's a chump. This coat's mine now. Whatever.
Because this is after he retired and the other guy was like publicly calling him out, wanting to have a chance at the titles. So they call him a punk because he's not willing to fight.
Yeah, I feel like medically not allowed, because they even say that in the scene with the doctors, is that you will not be allowed to, the boxing association will not clear you.
But they do also specifically say, okay, can you just keep that on the down low? We're going to retire, but we're not going to say the reason why. And they're like, yeah, no problem. We'll keep it under wraps.
Yeah, although I don't know why though, because I feel like that would stop people from thinking he's a coward.
Well, I think it goes back, you're right in that it makes people think he's a coward, but I think it also goes back to that idea of Rocky, and his rep, he wants to be seen as strong. And if the idea is he physically can't fight, then it's like, well, what else do I have?
Sure. Anyway, back to the kid. So,
yes.
The two boys run away. The girl they were with is actually sympathetic and sort of helps him up. And it's like, in fact, actually, after school, she comes up to him and she's like, oh, hey, you cold? Take my jacket. And he's like, no, it's fine.
It's a girl's jacket. No, ew.
It's fine. But this starts the beginning of what I guess is his love interest. Oh, they didn't really go much with it. It's just,
They had literally one line of flirting, and it was in that scene where she looks behind him and says, for an Italian kid, you got a nice butt. And he's like, yeah? All right. And that's it. That's the most they ever date.
Oh, no, that's not true. No? Later on, he does have his arm around her as if they are now a thing.
That's right. You're right, when they leave the house.
When he has his one dangly earring.
God, it was so 90s, it hurt me in a lot of ways. I was like, no, stop, please. You don't know what you're doing. Yeah,
although to be honest, I get that you're saying that because it's from that era. I don't care what era we're in. That thing looks stupid.
Oh, absolutely. It never looked good, but the 90s was where it was like, no, you can have a little bit of androgynous, and we're just all gonna have this single earring going on.
So he's having this bully problem, and they even steal his money the next day or whatever it is, where they punch him a couple times, and he's got a black eye and whatever. In fact, he has a black eye after the first day, and Rocky says, oh, so who are these kids that threw a punch? And he doesn't want to talk about it. Adrian's like, I want to go down to that school and talk, and he's like, no, that'll just make it worse. Let it. And the subject is brought up that maybe it wouldn't hurt to teach him how to throw a couple of punches, just for defense reasons.
Well, this is Tommy. By this point, is already at the dinner table, and we'll get to his little arc. But he's sitting there recounting his tragic backstory. He's like, yeah, no, my dad was just horribly abusive, and he was like all of my first fights until I finally got to knock him out. And you could just see the faces of the rest of the family be like, that's a horrible story. It doesn't really apply here. So please stop.
So he kind of trains in spite whilst Rocky's training Tommy.
After he gets his lunch money stolen a few more times.
Yeah, and so he actually ends up confronting the bullies on his own, and but this time he's like, all right, fine, come at me then, bro. So the bully comes at him, and he just punches him 4 times in the face. It's actually kind of vicious.
Oh, yeah. He's fantastic. I love they do it just outside of the schoolyard where there's this chain link fence. So all the kids see the first punch thrown and they start climbing on the fence. They're like, yeah, kick his ass. Right.
And the weird thing is at the end of this fight, he's like, have we got a problem now, bully? And he's like, no, we're good, man. And he shakes his hand. And then later on, they're hanging out. They're all friends now. He's made new friends by standing up to them.
Remember, kids. If you have any problems, violence is the answer.
Apparently so. apparently, and that's the thing. The girl's like, "Oh, we're gonna go tell your dad that you just did that." And it's like, "Yeah, let's go tell my dad." And of course, his dad's like, "Oh, that's great, son. I need to get back to training Tommy now." Just
it's not even like that, because obviously by this point Tommy's a little bit of a dick in his own right. So we get this sequence where like Stallone or Rocky's talking to his son and like actually getting invested, and then Tommy chimes in being like, "Hey, I'm cooling down here. I need to get back into the punch." And he's like, "Oh yeah, right." So he's like actively diverting the attention away from his actual son, and you just see his face fall, and he's goes off sad.
The face drops. He goes all sad, and I was just, the violin. Get the violin out. He's upset. So yeah, and we'll come back to him, but that's kind of his first stretch.
That's like the first hour,
of what his story is. The Tommy stuff, on the other hand, meanwhile, the promoter character keeps trying to think. Like, we cut back to him a few times on the phone, and he's watching the news, and he's like, I need to find a way to convince that Balboa into a fight. How do I do it? Yeah. And then, obviously, we get the Tommy introduction, where he's trying to ask Rocky to help him, and he wants him to be his trainer.
Yeah, he's just a dude on the street, and I guess he knew Rocky would be coming by this place because he's just standing around waiting for him. And then when he comes up, he's like, "Oh, Rocky, I know all your stuff. I just want you to watch me fight. Give me some tips, you know."
And then the promoter shows up from his limo and tries to again goad Rocky into accepting a fight. Adrian comes storming out from the pet shop across the street. This is the reveal, by the way, that she has got her old job back. What, 14 years later?
Look, there are certain companies that are always hiring.
Yes, okay. The pet shop's really been struggling without Adrian doing the books. And she comes out and chews out. And to be fair, there are little pockets of scenes that are all right on their own. And Adrian coming out and fighting with this guy, basically, it is one of those little moments where, okay, on its own, this works all right, because she is... Adrian really has come out of her shell since the first movie, but it's kind of this thing of strength now, where she's like, "No, you're not going to goad my husband into a fight, because I know what you're going to do. You're going to call him a chicken. You're going to say that he's a coward, and you're going to try and provoke his ego and get him to give in."
He's pulling out all the stops as well of "Oh, you're about to go work in a sweatshop. You could have all of your old life back if you just sign this paper right now."
Yeah, it's a comeback story. We all love a comeback story, especially for the golden boy like you. He's selling all this really hard.
I like how the scene is followed up though, because it's Rocky barely says a word throughout the whole thing. He's kind of considering it, and that's when Adrian comes out. And then from that point on, it's just Adrian versus the promoter. It's just them going back and forth at each other. And after he leaves, Rocky is just kind of left stuck, because again, we were talking about Rocky considers this idea of strength, and that's all he really has left now. His own wife is the one that's doing all the talking for him, and she's now gone out and got herself a job at her old place, which is hard for him to see, because they had a whole story arc, I think, in 2 of you don't need to go out and work. You don't need to go do that. I want to be able to provide for you.
I think that's part of the problem here, though, is it feels like a rehash of that beat from 2. This whole, you shouldn't have to work, so when Rocky's like, "Oh, she's too good for this, she shouldn't be working there," I'm like, yeah, we did this in 2, right?
That's fair. I think that they threw everything together all at once here, though, of he's not talking for himself, his wife is doing a job again, people are calling him a fool and weak and chicken, stuff like that, and everything is just hitting all at once that really drives home that desperation to find a solution here.
I think the problem is, though, is at this point, Adrian's just absolutely right. And there's no, ifs, ands, or buts about it. She is right. He shouldn't be fighting, and that he will be goaded into it, and that's why she does have to come out and, step in. She is right to do so. Which is interesting from a character perspective for her, because, she's... like I say, she's completely out of her shell now. She's completely willing to stand up and fight for the people she cares about in a way that she was never willing to fight for herself back in the day. Okay, good sort of acknowledgement of where her character is now. That's good, but it does mean that but this mostly works on its own. This scene. The problem is, though, is that next scene or 2's time is when we get the actual, and this was actually the moment where I first paused it, because I watched this movie in 3 chunks, because it was a bit of a slog to get through, if I'm honest.
I mean, I'll give you that, yeah.
Right. But so there's a scene where he's the gym's open, he's got people in, they're all training away, and Tommy comes in, he's in his gear, and he's like, "Come on, let me show you what I've got, Mister Balboa."
Yeah, he's in his gear, and they specifically say, "Hey, bro, you need like a head thing. Like you're gonna get punched in the head a lot." He's like, "Nah, I don't need it." And they're like, "Okay,
yeah,
sure, man. Have you signed the waivers?" Jesus Christ.
And then he starts sparring with this other guy, and he just starts trying to kill him. He just punches him in the head repeatedly in the stomach, and they're all yelling, "What are you doing? Stop! It's sparring! It's sparring! You're not ready to be actually trying to fight like this."
Like Rocky calls time, effectively the bell going off, and he just keeps pounding. He does not stop.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, this guy is clearly unhinged, which I think that's part of the problem with this character's arc, is that he starts off already feeling like he's unhinged. See, if he started off feeling like he could be the next Rocky, and that we, the audience, actually believe that, there could be something interesting here of someone who seems like a good person but gets seduced by the fame and the promises of whatever else. But between the dinner table scene where he starts going on about, which is obviously after this, it's like it's later that night, I think. But between that scene where he goes on about beating up his old man who used to beat him up, and there's the first person he ever knocked out, and whatever, and in this scene where he just keeps punching and clearly loses control in the ring because he just has this anger and rage to get out, it's like there's no nuance here. He already is what he is, and it's we're just leading to an inevitable conclusion where if there was maybe the idea that maybe he does have a heart, maybe Rocky is the right person to bring that out of him. There could be something there to tell with that story, but as it is, it just feels like he's never that. He's unlikable, and you never quite and maybe that's part of the point, is that we kind of side with all of the other characters. Paulie sees dollar signs when he first shows up. Very quickly, Paulie thinks he's a dick. Adrian clearly doesn't like him very much from the dinner table scene onwards. The son never likes him.
Because he stole his room.
But the funny thing is, though, is Rocky is technically our protagonist. So it is kind of an interesting idea to have us side with everyone else who can see that Rocky's wrong about something, but not Rocky himself. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I can see, in the right hands, I can see that being a very deft way of telling a story.
Oh yeah, there's tons of stories that can be told with the flawed protagonist of everyone else saying the fact that he has this issue, and yet he's just so blinded by whatever his motivation is to make something work. And it's always noble. It's not like Rocky is going out of this with dollar signs in his eyes or something like that.
No.
But it does come back to that sort of wanting to relive his glory days. And, he had a great relationship with Mick. He had this fantastic sort of father-son bonding thing going on. And now he sees that same opportunity here. He sees that this kid's got potential. He just needs to be shaped a little bit. Mick shaped me, and therefore I should be able to do the same to him. But the difference between the two being is that Mick shaped Rocky because Rocky was already a good person. He already had that heart to him. Whereas Rocky didn't know. Looking at Tommy, he doesn't know that there's just too much here that's already in the way, and there's not going to be a way to get him out of this sort of darker impulse side of himself.
Yeah, it's just too obvious that he's broken, and it makes Rocky seem too naive. And you can say, oh, he's blinded by his optimism is in the way, but there's a certain point where it's just too much to actually get into narratively, to actually buy into the story and sort of feel like it's believable that Rocky is just completely blind to any of this until the moment where it actually hits him later when it he shows his true colors.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, if we even go back to the first Rocky movie, I think that they do a good job of carrying over the traits. I think that back in that first movie, they did a good job of showing that he was kind of a naive guy who doesn't fully understand how the world works and yet still wants the best out of people. I think back to that one scene with the young girl who was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and Rocky just walks her home and tells her hey, you can do better than that. You don't have to be, you got to worry about your rep and stuff like that. And obviously he's naive that this girl is making her own choices and whatnot, but he just wants the best for her. I feel like this is directly continuing on that same sort of train of he wants this to work out for this kid because this kid wants it so badly. But ultimately, it's just his own naivete in the way.
Just as you were saying, I was just imagining the scene of Rocky like running into Rocky Jr. with his new girl and saying, "Hey, kid, go home. I want to have a chat with your girlfriend." And it's like, "Hey, you don't want to be a whore, do you?" Like just going down that path again.
Funny enough, apparently there was a scene shot in this movie of that girl. The actress came back and they shot the scene of them like running into each other, and she was actually like a full-blown prostitute now. So, womp womp.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
they didn't
geez.
cut it for tone reasons.
Okay, that's something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right, okay. So, which is not to say that there's not little moments where I think Stallone does a good job of channeling Rocky again, or moments where he finds something out and it is effective in the moment itself with his reaction to something, but it takes a while to get to those points because we have to go through the whole montage of him training Tommy, of Tommy seemingly having success after success, and just all of that playing out whilst the kid stuff's playing out alongside of it. I do think it is a very different film if you don't focus on the kid as much. I think maybe one of its biggest Achilles heels is the decision to try and treat the kid like a main character and try and tie Rocky's relationship to Tommy in a sort of comparison with his child. I think if the kid was just a background player like he was in the last two movies, and you had the full movie to focus on, okay, this is Rocky's motivations for working with this person who's troubled. Here's like more of that character as well to sort of like make him more, layered, so that even if he is still troubled from the start, we at least get a sense of there's hope for him maybe in some way that Rocky might be able to do something with him. And you can tell a better drama that's more focused. I think by doing the kids stuff alongside of it, you condense all the time you've got for all the other stuff. And then on top of that, the kid stuff itself is hokey. So everything is hokier than it should be across the board.
I think this movie, we joked in the previous ones that they gave Rocky a kid in the second movie and then immediately regretted it. And they just have never wanted to do a story about him. I think that the initial pitch for this movie, when Stallone was writing it, was this idea of Stallone taking Mick's role and taking on a new mentee, someone that he can teach. And it would be sort of this father-son comparison thing where Mick was his father figure. He would take on the father figure for this guy. But in writing that, he realized, crap, wait, he already has a son. I have to at least bring up the comparisons in that. And so he came up with this little side plot for the son to go through as well. But yeah, it feels like it's its own separate thing. It doesn't feel like it melds as well with like the main stuff that's going on. Especially because like, I think a big part of it is this idea of Rocky has trouble adjusting to this new life, not just in Philly, but this life of after boxing. Like he has a hard time of adjusting. Meanwhile, his son takes to Philly like super quick. Like he knocks the bully out, and then all of a sudden, he's in on the cool crowd. No one messes with him. Like it doesn't follow the same themes of like difficulty fitting in or anything like that. It just, his son works it out no problem.
Yeah, so getting to the next sort of major development then is the promoter and his crew start kind of buddying up to Tommy. They kind of intentionally get photographed with him. He basically pimps out like this woman that works for him, this redhead, to sort of allure Tommy into the dark side, if you will. And it just keeps going and going, and then ultimately it's when it gets to sort of the Christmas night, where they've made this deal, and Rocky like really naively saying, "Oh, where's Tommy? He should be with family." And Adrian's like, "He isn't part of our family." He's like, "Yeah, he kind of is. We're family to him."
Look, I bought him this necklace.
Yeah. Well, no, he didn't buy him a necklace. That's his necklace that Mickey gave him.
That's right.
That he's
That's
now going to
the
pass on to him, like it's his son. Except his son's sitting there watching, going, "That should be mine. I'm Rocky Jr. That should be my boxing glove necklace.
Dad, I got the golden gloves. Let me prove it."
But it cuts from this to where Tommy actually is, which is like a yuppie like party that the promoter's throwing, and they're basically, "Hey, you should be getting a title shot soon." And Tommy's getting frustrated throughout the montage before this for a couple of reasons. One, Rocky keeps saying it's not quite time to try and challenge for the title yet. You have to keep working and trying. So he's getting frustrated about that. But he's also
by the way,
yeah.
Sorry, by the way, George's original guy who he was trying to get to challenge Rocky at the beginning is currently the heavyweight champ just by like stats or whatever.
Yeah, we've basically found out that he's handed that title because obviously it was vacant after Rocky gave it up in 4. Right. So that answers that. But he's getting frustrated, Tommy, because they keep billing him as, oh, this is Rocky's protege. This is the person that Rocky's bringing to the ring. Rocky's getting cheered and he's getting chants at the fights, and not him. And then the newspapers are doing things like, oh, this is like Rocky's got a puppet and the puppet's Tommy. Like, that's all he is. He's just Rocky's, like, you know, avatar, effectively. And this starts to really upset Tommy.
I mean, I don't like the execution so much because they just, like you said, they started him off in too much of an unlikable spot. So showing that he's getting all this praise and adoration, like he's winning these fights and whatnot, but ultimately he's still not happy. There's a room for that. I think that is a decent plot of showing this sort of inferiority complex, but he was already such a dick that it just doesn't work for me. I'm just already upset with him.
I think the problem is that all of it's in the montage, really. Like, all the first beats are in the montage. I think it should be a quieter moment where we see it play out, where it's the end of a match, he's very happy, and then the crowd starts chanting Rocky, and then give us just that moment, like, on its own without the montage around it, so that we really get the first sort of seeds start to, like, form. Because the way it's brought up in this movie, the Rocky chant, I think, is after the part in the montage where he sees the newspaper and then punches Rocky's belt. And it's like, okay, so you're our first visual of him getting frustrated that Rocky's hogging the spotlight, albeit not intentionally, is him having this strong reaction and punching something. And it's like, well, okay, so you're telling me again that he's an aggressive douchebag, and like that's just all he is. So, you know, whereas if it had bubbled up, if it had been like, okay, he wants to get out from under Rocky's shadow or whatever, you could have done something with that. But anywho, they come over for Christmas, and basically this is Tommy's chance. Although I do love how Adrian's like, don't let them in, Polly, and then Polly ends up letting them in anyway.
Yeah, he's like, they brought presents. What was I supposed to do?
But Tommy wants to speak to Stallone outside, and is like, hey, you know, I'm signing with the promoter tomorrow. You can still be my trainer. I would like you to, but if you know, it's my way or the highway. That's the last thing he says. Although he's in the car by that point when he says that, but.
Yeah, it has a reason. He takes off down the highway.
Yes. Yes, because he's got a new car because the promoter's given him an advance check for 20 grand or whatever it was.
I love how Rocky's trying to talk to him, trying to reason out, just being like, hey, this guy doesn't care about you. He's just in it for the money, whatever. Meanwhile, that redheaded girl, the one that the promoter's pimping out, is the entire time just like, pull up the convertible hood. Like, let's get going. We're going to be 20 minutes late. And eventually Tommy's just like, would you just shut up for like a minute, please? Thank you.
Clearly so happy in your new relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's a big thing here where like Rocky's trying to convince him that, you know, the money will come eventually, like it'll happen once you're at that stage. But as we kind of find out, because, you know, the fight then happens where he challenges for the title, the promoter set it up, and we see it play out on TV, and Rocky watches it, and there's a lot of little bits to talk about here. But one of the key things that happens is that after the fight in the press conference is that it's made very clear that this guy who was champion was basically handed the belt and never beat Rocky for it. So this was actually an easy fight that was set up, and they basically say, hey, you've not really proven you deserve that title yet, which obviously really pisses off Tommy, because he's like, well, I just won the title. What are you talking about?
I mean, I'm, as much as I don't like him, I'm on Tommy's side with that. Like, if I just won the biggest moment of my life, the heavyweight championship, and all of the reporters came up saying like, yeah, but it doesn't count, I'd be like, screw you, man.
I know.
I just did it.
No, that's a fair point. But the reason why I'm bringing that up, though, is that I think this ties back into what Rocky was saying about because Rocky kept saying, "You're not ready yet. We're building up to it. We're building up to it." I think Rocky was right, you know, and like at least he was genuine in what he was saying, and that Rocky's assuming that when the title fight comes, it'll be a real challenge, like when he went up against Apollo or whoever else. And he's, you know, this kid's not ready for that yet. But this kid didn't get that fight. This kid got the paper champion.
He got a manufactured one,
Yeah. So
I do wonder if it was also a little bit because obviously during the montage you see Rocky looking over at the promoter, every time he kind of buddies up to it. I wonder if it was kind of a thing where he was like, "Look, you'll get the chance, but like, let's let somebody else be the champion, and then you come in and take that because I just don't want to be around that guy. I don't want that guy to get like the benefit of any of this."
Yeah, so the fight takes place though, and I did think it was a bit weird because like there's a whole thing at the Christmas night where like they have Polly dressed up as Santa and tries to do like stuff with not only just Rocky Jr. but the girl and the two bullies that are now his friends are all there, and like I just imagine how awkward you must feel as one of these three other kids, like because this family fight starts because Rocky Jr. starts arguing with Rocky. It's like, oh, you don't care about me. This is stupid. I don't want to do this. And Rocky, of course, is a very genuine, sweet soul where he's like, no, Father Christmas is here. We should, presents. This is fun,
Can I just point out a single line here?
Yes.
Baffled me. It is Rocky, as Rocky Jr. is so pissed off. He's got his friends. They're all leaving. They're going out. Or sorry, they're going down to the basement, I think, at this point. But regardless, Rocky steps in and says, hey, I just wanted to have some fun, like last Christmas. And I'm like, Rocky, you were in Russia. You were in Russia last Christmas, buddy.
That is a very, very good point, which no one really calls him out. I think the son does say something like, this is nothing like last Christmas, which technically that's right.
Yeah,
I mean,
last Christmas he was sitting with his two friends and a robot, so it's nothing at all like last Christmas.
Last Christmas, my dad went to Russia, and the very next day, his brain went away. Well, I tried to rhyme, but your line was funnier. Anyway, so he storms out with his earring.
You have to mention that because it's very prominent.
Yeah, and he yells at his dad about everything, and he's like, "No, I'm a cool kid now." And when he walks away with his like friends, he puts his arm around the girl, and it's like, "Oh, I'm I'm a street thug now with a girlfriend. Like that's what I am."
Like Adrian's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "Out later, bye," and he just walks away.
And she's like, "We'll get into him." So Rocky goes looking for him, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is as Tommy drives away because that technically happens after the blow up with the kid.
Yeah, I mean, all this is mixing together in my head. Yeah,
that's fine. But as the Tommy's driving away, Rocky has like kind of a little PTSD moment for a moment there.
Oh, that's right.
Car driving off.
He has flashes of Drago in his face.
Yeah, and Adrian runs up, puts the coat on and whatnot, and they just have a little breakdown for a moment where
honestly,
he doesn't
like the setup for this stupid. The scene with Tommy in the car, just super two-dimensional. I will say. This is where these two just get to act and just get to be the characters they've been playing for 14 years, and they're very good in this scene.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They're sitting there, they're hashing it all out, they're yelling at it. By the way, if I lived in this neighborhood, I would definitely expect to hear a shut up and go inside. But they're basically just hashing out all the problems where Rocky feels, upset that Tommy's just ditching him. He feels like he lost everything for his family and all that stuff. And Adrian just comes back with the constant thing she always does of like, it's about us. It's about family. It's about you. We all love each other. We don't need anything more than that. And Rocky has to go off and find his son, who he clearly has been neglecting this whole time.
Yeah, he says a bunch of things here. He admits that he thinks he hates being here. He hates being poor. He doesn't want this. And Adrian has to kind of like snap him back into kind of like remembering what's important. And it's a good scene, like, right? Don't get me wrong. It's kind of like a lesser version of like a scene we maybe had in Rocky 3 in the beach, but it still works. They're still both good at playing these characters, so it does work, right? Because the thing is, this scene, once Tommy's away, it takes away all the new characters we don't like, and it's just these two playing these roles, and it works.
Yeah.
So he goes and finds him, and his son is on the same street corner as the punks were in the first movie, and they're smoking.
Scandalous.
Because he's that type of kid now. But Rocky comes up and sort of asks about it, and doesn't grill him for it though. Just says, yeah, I did, but I've done a lot of dumb things.
I love all the friends basically scatter. They're like, do you want us to stick around? He's like, nah, get out of here. And the girl like stops Rocky and it's just like, are you gonna hit him? He's like, no, I'm not gonna hit. What? Get out of here.
Oh yeah, I think your tone of Rocky's response is a bit off though, because he replies a bit more in a sort of like no, I ain't gonna hit him. Like it's a lot more sensitive the way he says it. But I actually really like that exchange. Like I feel like you were bringing that up to make fun of it, but I actually think her being concerned that given like the argument they had, that the lives that these kids all come from, where they all have maybe abusive dads or whatever,
fair, yeah.
that she says, hey, are you going to hit him? And he's like, no, and he reassures her that he's not. I actually found that oddly kind of sweet in a dark way, where, oh, that says a lot about the lives these other 3 kids are living, if, like, that was her assumption, is that he might get hit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's fair.
If anything, it was the only moment in the entire kids plot where I felt a little bit like her asking that question suggested a lot, so it was a lot more impactful than Tommy just being like, yeah, my old man used to come home drunk and beat up me and my mom, and I eventually...
What do you mean exposition dump? I'm not sure what that means.
So I eventually just came back and clocked him in the face. I punched him, I knocked him out. Anyway,
yeah.
But yeah, one of the problems with this plot, though, is it all gets wrapped up here very, very easily, very, very neatly. Rocky just kind of says, no, I've made some bad choices, but you know what? It's going to be me and you, just like the old times, me and you, just us.
Home team.
Home team, no Tommy. And despite the fact that he is now at the age where it's normal to be kind of shitty to your parents, he kind of just smiles and returns to being a little kid again, which is, I don't know, it feels a bit like, I don't know, disingenuous as to what a kid's life actually is like, but...
Yeah, I mean, if we're going for realism here, I think he would begrudgingly go home and be like, okay, we all said some things we regret and whatnot, but he would still be angry. He'd still be angsty. Like, as much as it is his dad saying that he would make all these changes and he's realized all these things, like, actions speak louder than words. He needs to be able to see that first, and there hasn't been any of that yet.
Well, that actually leads me to my next thing that's a bit weird for me, is that almost the very next scene is Rocky and Polly watching the championship fight on the TV. And I thought this was very interesting, the way they cut this, because I felt like this scene like ended the tension between Rocky and his son. But this scene where he's watching the fight, it kept cutting to the son and also Adrian and them looking very like concerned, like Rocky's far too invested in this. Rocky's punching his punching bag as he's watching the fight and yelling out like commands. Not that obviously it can't be heard, but it's like he's like willing it from his basement. Like he's willing Tommy to do certain things. And I felt like it was a little bit strange for me that they treat this like they're getting concerned, because all I could think is like, okay, no, I'm focused on my family life now. I am going to be I'm going to pay attention as a father. I've realized what's important. But it still makes sense that he's invested enough that he would want to watch the fight and see if Tommy wins. So it feels a bit weird to me that the son and Adrian come down and it's like oh no, he's regressing. He's back on the bottle. He's back on the boxing booze.
I mean, I get what you're saying. It does make sense that he would be invested, but I think it's specifically the word choices and the way it is intercut that really drives home the point that it is not I want to see how this turns out sort of thing. It is still that living vicariously through him sort of thing. Like, this is ultimately him, like...
It's the last shard of that.
Yeah, it's and they know the type of person Tommy is. They know all of, like, the stuff going on, and they are just worried because, like, once this happens, once this fight is over, win or lose, what happens next to him? Like, I don't think they think that Rocky is going to be able to handle this level of like, and now it's done. Like, you don't have any more to go for after this point.
I don't hate that, and I kind of see that in the scene. I see what you're saying. I think maybe the problem I have with it is that it's really weird that it comes right after the scene where it feels like he wrapped up the tension with his son. Because if they'd had like some other stuff in between and it was like, oh, this maybe is a moment of like, he's like, maybe he actually does go a little bit, and I don't know what you'd be doing in the movie at this point, but maybe he does go a few scenes where he is genuinely not thinking about it. He's not paying attention to what Tommy's doing. He's just focused on his family. But then he says, hey, his championship matches tonight, I do want to see if he wins. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure, right, you're going to go watch the fight, whatever. And then they get concerned because he's acting this way through it. I'd be like, okay, maybe they're worried that he is getting too invested or whatever. I can see that, but it does feel just tonally like we just fixed this relationship in the previous scene, and immediately we're getting shots again of his son looking concerned that his dad's too obsessed with this other thing going on.
Yeah,
it's like
I think that without changing any of the structure of it, without adding those separate scenes, I think the way you fix it is because the scene opens up with Rocky, Paulie, and the son all down there to start, and Adrian comes down later. I think you started with Adrian down there to begin with. So you see that the concern is not from a point of, oh, my dad is still over concerned with Tommy's well-being. It's more focused on, like, even Adrian sees, like, no, he's just too into this as a whole, ignoring the father-son stuff.
Actually, that's a good, starting with Adrian being concerned rather than his son. I like that idea. It's not like a perfect fix, but it does. I think the problem is, you're right. The son being the one who's concerned first makes it seem like he's just concerned about the same thing he was concerned about before, rather than Adrian's concern, which would seem more like the adult concern, which is that he is too, wrapped up in this. He's too passionate about it. It's something that is going to affect him. Obviously, the big thing, though, is that after he wins, he gets on the microphone and says he wants to thank the one person, the one man who made this happen. And then Rocky's like sort of like, smiling.
Puffing up his chest. He's like, all right, here it comes. Let's do it.
He's going to give me the praise. And then he says the promoter instead. And like just the lead balloon, like that room, the tone just drops.
It is worth noting that during the entire fight, including the lead up, like as Tommy's coming out into the ring, the crowd is all booing him because I guess news broke out of like him ditching Rocky. And it's just like, boo, Rocky was better. You suck.
Yes, which obviously is not going to please him very much. But yeah, like this is all just... It really feels like this is the moment where Rocky finally realizes who Tommy was, and that he wasn't going to change him, and that this is what it is. Because one of the things they set up at the start of the movie is that Rocky's trying to warn his son when they move to the city that, hey, you may get scammed out here. I think Paulie brings it up, but Rocky's trying to explain it. And of course, Rocky's son's like, oh, you mean like a deception? And he's like, yeah, that's a good word.
That's a big 3-syllable word. I don't know that one.
But when they're fighting later on, before they make up, he says, you tried to warn me about scams and deceptions, but you're the one who's been scammed, or something like that, he says.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this feels like a genuine thing, and I do like that he does say, like, hey, do you mind if I go and have a drink with your Uncle Paulie? Because Paulie says, let's go get a drink. Because Paulie's pissed. Like, this is the thing. When I said Paulie has some of these better little moments in this, at least compared to the last couple of movies, it was a little moment like this where Paulie's the one that gets up and says, no, this TV's bad for my ears. Like, I'm not letting you hear any more of this. It feels like, in his own way, Paulie just did something nice for Rocky.
This movie definitely... like gets Paulie in the least selfish he's ever been. It definitely feels like he has jumped that hill. It's just that he opened the movie with the stupidest decision of all time.
It started with him doing the worst thing he's ever done or ever going to do. But it started, but the rest of it is fine. It's the best he's been for movies.
You say it's the worst thing he's done or ever will do. I know you've seen the movie, but I fully expect Balboa's going to open up. It's like, well, Paulie committed triple homicide, and
dear. I actually don't remember if he's in. I
don't know.
Balboa.
I'm trying to stay as innocent as possible, as clean, so I don't know.
I mean, he did pass away just last year. It's not, he's not been gone that long, so it's very possible he was in. But I'm checking, but I won't tell you.
All right, fair enough. So immediately following, like they get into the press conference for him celebrating the thing. We've already been through this, where everyone's basically saying like, you won it on to technicality of the guy was a paper, like mache guy, like. None of it was actually real. All this was awful.
The term is paper champion.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't. I was just trying to stutter my way through that.
No, but it's an actual, like, it wasn't, they weren't making a reference to like his, like, the physical nature of the guy. It's a term that basically means you're just a champion on paper, because we need a champion in the books.
That's fair. Though they did also say that he wasn't giving his all in that fight. And the promoter even comes up, like, not defending Tommy at all. He comes up and he's like, well, of course the guy wasn't up to, like, his full strength, but Tommy could still beat him at full strength, probably. Whatever. And Tommy's just like, what do you mean he wasn't? What? Huh?
And at one point, when they're all talking about Rocky being like this, hero, and like you'll never be what he was, like the promoter just like grabs the mic and says, "Yeah, Rocky was a legend. We all know that." And like Tommy is seething. That but clearly the promoter's just trying to like play to the crowd, because he doesn't want to like. He's doing that thing where he's dancing on the line of making sure he's like still in their good graces, and he's like, because he knows that if they go against Rocky and say, "Oh, Rocky's a chump, we hate him," it'll just make the booze worse. It'll just like further solidify the villain status.
Yeah, when they get out of the meeting, Tommy's like, what the hell was that? And he's like, look, once the press makes up their mind, you just got to, like, run with it. You can't just fight against it like that.
But, of course, Tommy's a hothead. He's pissed off. And the promoter's like, the only way you're going to get that respect you want is to challenge Balboa. You have to insult people he cares about. You have to hit him where it hurts. You have to goad him into the fight.
I've seen that if you ask his wife to sleep with him, or to sleep with you, that'll get you. That's what gets you the fight.
I forgot about that earlier on when I was trying to goad him into the fight. But now I've remembered it, now that I've watched that clip back from Rocky 3, you should
Have
go
you
do
ever
that.
considered a mohawk?
So, yeah, we get to see where Rocky's with, like, his friends in the bar with Paulie, and they're in the bar, and like a gang, like, Tommy, the promoter, and, like, the couple of cronies the promoter has are outside, and they're really, hey, Rocky Balboa, you in there? We're calling you out.
I think there's also, like, a TV camera there. I think it's a news station.
They've brought a TV camera because they want to get, like, this challenge on camera. Probably because they think it'll further entice Rocky to, like, give in because he's been watched by the audience. But it also means that, you know, Adrian and the kid can see it on TV and be like, wait, Dad's fighting? What's going on? So, yeah, they basically try and challenge him, and Rocky just says, no, I don't want to fight you, like, and goes back inside.
Goodbye, and just closes the door.
Not interested. So Tommy follows him into the bar, starts heckling him, says he's not done with him, blah, blah. And Paulie gets offended. Again, Paulie being the most heroic he's been in the entire franchise.
Yep.
It's so funny that the bad movie's the one where Paulie actually, like, has a little bit of, like, positives in it. But
oh, yeah, absolutely.
he comes up and he's getting closer to Tommy as he's saying, no, you're a chump, you're whatever. And I'm like, okay, right, so Tommy's going to hit Paulie. And what's so funny is I'm like, okay, I get that that's the start of what will make Rocky want to fight, but the fact that this is the only thing that makes Rocky want to fight him is really funny to me. You hit Paulie, the guy that gave away all of my fortune? Now you're mine. Now your ass belongs to me.
Look, I know the promoter told you that asking my wife to sleep with you was the only way, but my second cue of getting into fights is you hurt my friends.
Like, anyway, so yeah, Paulie eats this punch, and this is a professional boxer, obviously, so it's a pretty nasty punch.
I genuinely thought Paulie was going to be unconscious because, again, the heavyweight champion of the world just punched this dude in the face.
Yeah.
Paulie should be dead, but at the very least, he should be unconscious.
Well,
but
I mean,
he sits up and he's just like, it's whatever. Don't worry about it.
I think he's lost a tooth, so I guess, like, do you get knocked out from getting hit in the mouth or the jaw?
I think you get knocked out when your brain hits the edge of your skull. I think that's what causes it.
Sure. Well, that's the thing, you know, the movie's been telling us that, Rocky can't fight again because if he takes a hit to the brain, it might just kill him or make him brain dead. So, you know, when he basically says, all right, you want to fight? Fine, but I'm retired. The only place we're fighting is right here, right now, you little bitch. And, of course, despite the fact that the promoter's yelling, no, it has to be in the ring because we can make money that way.
Yeah, I love that.
Of course, Tommy's like, yeah, come on then. So, and I think the one thing I like about this fight, which I mostly don't like, is it's silly, it's over the top, you know, the circle forming around them wrestling at various points as well. It's not just throwing punches.
Yeah.
The one part of it I do like is that Rocky, like, just kind of puts him down in 4 quick hits. It's like, Rocky just won. And the only reason why the fight continues is because this piece of shit gets up and punches Rocky in the back. And, like,
sucker punching.
Yeah. So it's only because he cheats out of pettiness that the fight even keeps going. Like, Rocky just showed that he was better at it immediately. So.
Yeah. And I love how the promoter basically comes up to him. And he's the only, like, I believe Tommy might have stayed down. Like, he may have just been like, I just got my ass handed to me. I'm not going to do that. But the promoter comes up and specifically tells him, like, look, I told you not to start this fight regardless. We should have been making money off it. But if you lose this, it's all gone. Like, I'm not going to try to rehab your image after losing a street fight with this old dude. So get back in there and do your thing.
Yeah, old in boxing terms, because Stallone's like 40 or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe 45.
There was also, we skipped over it, but there was also a segment where when they're trying to goad Rocky out of retirement, they actually have his medical, like, forms saying that he's unable to fight. And I just hate that fact of just like they specifically show the doctor saying like totally confidential, don't worry about it, and he's just like, look at what I got here, Mr. Brain on a stick.
I mean, I wonder though, was that the doctors that went back in their word, or like did he pay like some corrupt nurse to like sneak them out of the filing cabinet?
I mean, either way is possible, but it just sucks for Rocky.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, most of this fight though is kind of silly, and especially when it sort of dawns on you, oh, this is the final fight. This is the replacement for the big final fight of the movie. Which, like, I can see like a version of this where it's actually a good drama, where a final fight being a street fight actually feeling like some kind of payoff, but this does just not feel like it works that well. The fight's not that interesting for the most part after the opening, like I said, for the dramatic reasons. And then, of course, like when he gets put down after quote unquote round 2, where he's taken a pretty bad beating and his head's like thumping and whatever, he has the moment where he imagines Mickey telling him to get up for one more round. And this is when he rises in slow motion as dun 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 dun, and I'm like, you don't get to play that. This moment does not justify the Rocky theme.
Nah, I here's the thing. I like, in theory, this little PTSD like flash around that he's got going on of like Mickey standing in a darkened room just shouting like positive things, get up, you know, I'm here with you, I'm ready to fight. Mixing together also with the Ivan Drago fight of like him almost dying in that ring and just being knocked down over and over again. In theory, I like it, but in execution, it feels so 90s with like the desaturated hyper like it feels like a Gatorade commercial more than it feels like a pumping up sort of moment. Yeah,
there's quick cuts. There's also like quick cuts to like Drago just standing there, which makes me think they actually got Lundgren back for like a couple of quick shots.
Yeah. Either that or they just had some leftover like promotional stuff that they didn't use.
Because there's stuff where he's just in like a sort of dark void, but the cameras are flashing on him as he's throwing punches to the camera kind of thing, which looked like it was new. And then I think it's either him or maybe it's Mickey, but there's like a quick cut to like one of them standing like a doorway at one point, like a dream sequence, just sort of spliced in there somewhere. And like all of this was just like, it's too much. It's too whatever.
The tiny little intercut though that I was like, all right, I'm glad you did it, is they're going for such hyper emotion at this point. They have the sequence with the Apollo's trainer, Duke, like yelling out no, and he's always got the top tier reactions, and they do a full zoom in like into his eyes to show how like big this no is. And I'm like, yeah, if you're doing a hyper emotive sequence, you had to put him in somewhere. There's no way to get around that.
Yeah, and then of course eventually, because they've seen it in TV, Adrian and the kids show up. And the kid's like rooting for him, but Adrian's just terrified because she knows that one bad punch to the head will kill him, which does feel more likely in a street fight where it's like a professional boxer throwing no gloves, just raw punches. He's raw dogging the punches, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And plus, like, they show specifically that a lot of this fighting is not just punches. Like, they show Rocky pulling some, like, as best I can call it, is judo moves, where he like flips around and gets him flipped over.
Yeah, at one point he does a leg sweep. And I'm like, okay. I guess they're not just using boxing techniques. It is just a street fight, but still, it's kind of weird. And they're tackling each other and whatever. There is one point where they just start kind of rolling on the ground, and I went, yeah, this is what a real fight looks like. Not like proper strategic fighting. It's just on the ground like a couple of kids.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. So, yeah, one little thing when he gets up and like is ready to start that final round again, they show the train, like the overhead train going by.
Oh, yeah.
And then they show Stallone's head like tilting up into frame, showing that he's getting back up on his feet. It might be the worst visual in this whole movie because it's also the moment the music cues in. It's just overly everything.
Yeah, it's also they're implying, oh, those trains going around Philadelphia are like the blood going through his veins. Like he is the city, he is Philadelphia, he is the night. I mean, he's the boxer.
And that's when Rocky walks over and picks up the Liberty Bell and swings it at Tommy's head.
But not only does the music come in, but you only get a little bit of it, and then it turns into like a beat kind of thing. It's a completely different track.
It's like a 90s hip hop beat, but also like the cinematic fight scene choreography noise as well. But no, like the Rocky theme just fades out immediately. Yeah.
You get enough of it to know it and reckon it and hear it and have the pop, but then it just kind of goes away, and you're left with what this movie's music is. So yeah, rough times. Ultimately, so the final sequence after we get some freeze frames and whatnot.
He knocks out Tommy. He then goes over to the promoter.
Yes.
And the promoter's like, if you touch me, I'll sue you. And he repeats it like 4 times.
He does. He says it a lot.
Yeah. And then Rocky just turns around and then turns back, does an uppercut, and says, like, sue me for what? As if to say, I'm broke. You can't get anything out of me. Ha ha ha. Ignoring the fact that that's an assault charge and a felony, but whatever.
Well, I did notice at the end of the scene, 2 cops were arresting Tommy for starting this fight. I'm like, Rocky did throw a lot of punches there.
Oh, yeah. Rocky even said, like, meet me outside. Like, he specifically is one who said that as much as they were calling out the fight, he was the one saying, we do it now with unofficial rules.
Yeah. And he also said one more round after he stood up. He's like, yeah, come on, one final round.
Yeah. I'm going to chalk it up to the fact that everyone in Philly loves him, and therefore no one's going to arrest him.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just a case of, like, there was enough witnesses that were like, yeah, Tommy was clearly the dick. He was the instigator. He attacked an innocent, poor old man named Paulie, and Rocky's just defending the poor and the weak. That's all it is.
Yeah. Also, for some reason, as they're walking away from the fight, Adrian, Rocky, Paulie, and the kid, there's a priest there who he talked to earlier, and the priest is just, like, super happy about all this.
This is a callback to... Was it 1 or 2? But either way, there was a scene where before the fight, he's running late. He goes to this same window and says, "Hey, Father, can you give me a blessing for good luck for the fight?"
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that.
I remember that, and that was the callback in the earlier scene here, because him and Tommy were like, hey, could you give us a blessing to make me a good manager? And he does so. But I don't understand why the priest is just here at this final fight. Not to mention, it doesn't do a fade out on Rocky's family. It does a fade out on the priest.
Yes, as he's like blessing everyone after the fight's over, which is also a bit weird. Yeah,
I don't get it.
The final scene though is Rocky and his son jogging up the steps at the Philadelphia Art Gallery.
Statue's still up there.
And there's a nice little touch that the son is just kind of jaunting up, whereas Rocky's holding his side a little bit, like, oh, I'm not in practice, I'm a little out of shape, whatever. And we get maybe the line of the movie, which is like, so you're telling me there's pretty pictures in this building? I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's like, I've been running up these stairs all these years. I had no idea there were pretty pictures there.
Oh, dear. And then it's a line about, you're never too old to start learning stuff, whatever. And the movie just kind of like ends on a shot of the back of the statue, which is pretty much where he was when he was doing that pose back in the first movie. So, it clearly feels like an ending. It feels like this is the goodbye. Like he's finally done. This was the last hurrah. Yep.
But if you didn't feel that enough, we then get a slideshow sequence as the credits play of all the iconic moments from all of the movies, including the one you just watched, which is like 2 iconic moments maybe.
All the iconic moments from 1 to 4, and then some stills from Rocky 5.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Did you notice though during these stills they barely showed any Apollo, at all? Well.
Yeah, I was thinking that. You do eventually see a couple of decent ones of them in 3, but they ignore them completely for 1 and 2, which is weird.
And they only show him like with Rocky in there as well. Meanwhile, they show Clubber Lang on his own. They show Ivan Drago on his own. It's super weird they cut out Apollo for that. They show Hulk Hogan there. They bring him back.
It's a little bit bullshit. I mean, at least Apollo he's on like a poster in the kid's room, like earlier on in the movie at least. So that's something, I guess.
I guess. It just seemed weird to me that you're doing this thing of like, look how far we came, and you're ignoring the dude who like was there from the beginning up until halfway through the last movie.
Yeah, it is weird. My only assumption, I mean, I can't justify it for 2, but for 1, they had a lot more stills from 1 than anything else, and they maybe just thought, we've had too many, because there's too many important moments in the story from 1, because 1 was the actual story.
Right.
So... we've done so many of them, we were cutting back, but it feels weird not to give Apollo a bunch of them in 2, because like he became more of a character in 2. It is weird.
Yeah, but absolutely.
Hey. It's Rocky 5. It's pretty bad. I think it's clearly the weakest of the bunch. It doesn't have the charm or the fun of 3 and 4. It doesn't have the actual good drama rating. of one. There are moments where characters get to be themselves, and the acting from the actors portraying these characters is as good as it's ever been. But unfortunately, it heavily focuses on two new characters. Well, one's technically not a new character,
Right.
but he is. Between Rocky's son and then Tommy, and both of those plots are just unpleasant. Even if you can understand the point that we're trying to make, they just do not work that well. So it's a whole thing. But before we get to the rating, though, as is a new tradition on the show, David, what was your favorite scene?
You know, I was really hoping that as we talked through it, one would jump out at me. One would be like, oh yeah, that one. That was clearly the best moment. But like, no, not really. If I had to put one as the scene of the movie, I think, I don't know. It's weird because out of all the plots, I think I disliked the kids plot the most.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that it had some of the more like fun moments for me. Like all of Rocky and Tommy's stuff just felt so blah the whole time. Like nothing really jumped out at me as like super big or exciting or anything like that. But like the kids plot, like at the very least showing him beat the crap out of the bully gave me like some interest, you know? It gave me something to be interested in immediately. Whereas everything else is just kind of like blending together. So I think I am going to pick one from Rocky's plot, just looking through here one more time. And I think it's solely based off the editing because it actually, it made me care about how this was intercut. It made a good mood of how it was presenting it. And that is Rocky watching the final fight, watching the fight on TV for the heavyweight belt and how it intercut between him like punching the bag. And then as they make collision, you see the collision on the screen. And it all built up this mood of excitement, but ultimately like tension of how is this going to wrap up? How is this going to work out for Rocky in the end? So I'll give it to that, but it's not like a strong one.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. You know, it's edited quite well. I think I have to probably go with the scene of Adrian kind of finally confronting Rocky after he's been rejected by Tommy. Notably, technically it's the same scene as Tommy in the car, but I'm not counting that first part. After Tommy leaves and it's just Adrian and Rocky, because it's the time where I felt like the most invested. Like it was actually just straight up talking about what Rocky's going through in this movie and not wanting to go back to this poorer life and sort of finding some acceptance in there. I don't know, it felt like a scene where the characters got to be the characters that we've known the whole time without being like, you know, poisoned by other characters that have been added that I don't want. Because that's the thing, like in Rocky 2, 3, 4, like you built up Mickey and then we lost Mickey, but by that point you built up Apollo and Apollo's trainer. Like we had a nice roster of characters and like we've lost so many of them for this movie and replaced it with Tommy and Robert. That, you know, just not that great. But it does lead to another interesting question: is who's your MVP of the movie?
Hell if I know, man. Like every time I think about a character, either the main cast, the new characters, anything like that, I just think like, they weren't that impressive though. There wasn't anything that was really hitting me. I think just by default of which character I think gave the most consistently positive performance, it's got to be Adrian. I think that seeing her evolution from Rocky 1, and it's nice that they did do a little callback in this to Rocky 1, specifically to remind us like how shy she was and how much she's changed to where she's willing to stand up for her husband to like someone who is absolutely out, like weight classing her 100%. I like that. I like seeing this evolution of a character there. Paulie's got a similar sort of thing, but I think the reason that it's so hard for me to pick is that nobody between the two of them get that much focus. Like the story is much more focused on Tommy, the promoter, and Rocky Jr., and I don't think any of them are even candidates for that. So I'll give it to Adrian just because I think she was the best actress in this movie. But ultimately it's just a matter of she didn't have enough time to really do anything with it to get a strong lead over everybody else.
Yeah, it's tough. Part of me thought, oh, maybe it's Paulie's time to shine.
Yeah.
But
Paulie always thinks that too. Unfortunately, it never is.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's the case, really, if I really think about it. I think it can't be. I mean, it could be Rocky, but it couldn't be Stallone because Stallone also wrote this, and he's guilty of a lot of what the problems are. So I think it probably is Adrian out of like who's here, but it's not a strong one because she stood out a bit more in previous movies where she really did steal the show. Here, I feel like she had a couple of really good scenes, but that was kind of
It's less of a standout person and more of a process of elimination. Like you got to get rid of all the bad stuff and just be left with, all right, I guess it's you.
Interesting. I clicked on the actress who played the girl.
Jewel.
I thought her name was Karen.
Karen was the redhead. Elizabeth Peters was the one who was the younger girl, and that's the only reason I know that is because the redhead was born in like 1960, like her actress, and there's no way that would have lined up here.
Oh, yeah, fair point. I just saw the blonde hair and assumed it was that girl growing up.
Same.
Okay, fair enough. Well, the actress who played the redhead then, Talia Shepherd. I was curious. I clicked on her thinking it was the kid, so I was curious if she kept acting. Interestingly, this actress had kept acting up till 2018, but it's all a bunch of like, uncredited person at bank in this movie, person at this thing. But I was scrolling down the list, and I saw a name of a character called Madame Cleavage, and I thought, what's that in? And then I read the movie as the Da Vinci Code, and I went, wait a minute, there's not a character called Madame Cleavage in the Da Vinci Code.
Very close, though.
Yeah, and then I read it again, and I went, it's called the Da Vinci Coed. It's like a softcore, like TV thing. Okay, fair enough.
Yep. 3 sexy spies, blah, blah, blah. Power to spark people's carnal desires. Yep. Glad she had a career. That being said, Elizabeth Peters, the girl who played the love interest, did nothing. Did absolutely nothing.
I clicked on the Da Vinci Code. I need to mention what the poster of the Da Vinci Code is.
Yep. Please.
Now, you're familiar with the Mona Lisa?
No, please describe it.
Right, well, a painting of just a woman looking at the painter, right? Looking at the artist, the lens, if you will, of the imaginary camera. So this is the Mona Lisa, but with a wet t-shirt, and you can see her nipple. That's the
That seems like the sort of thing Rocky's expecting to be at the Philadelphia Art Gallery.
Well, based on what your son's been drawing.
Yeah, that's fair. Yep.
Which, like, I suppose, we should probably mention, like, him going to the art gallery with his son's kind of him just, like, further accepting of embracing what his son likes and what his son's into.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Absolutely.
That's fine.
I don't think it does a bad job at the father-son stuff. It's not interesting. They don't do it well. Well,
I think it does a bad job at any of the execution. It just, like, the raw bones of what it is are fine. It's the how they tell the story, what actually happens to the son, how the son reacts to things, like all that stuff is what doesn't work.
Whether the kid is 8 or 14 at any given moment.
Yep, that's a problem. That's a problem. Because keep in mind, this should still be 1985. Well, 1986. Well, no, because I don't know if we get to New Year's at the end. I think it's still Christmas.
Let's just assume that they were stuck in Russian customs for like 4 years.
Okay, all right, sure. Yeah. Sure. But technically, there was a time jump between... there was a year time jump between 1 and 2.
There were several years between 2 and 3.
3 years, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where he held on to the title and was like fighting off people for it.
Yeah. So, yeah, because they said in 4 it was their 9th anniversary.
Yep.
Right?
But that was them saying it was 9th. Meanwhile, every other thing in the movie pointed at it being like only 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah, but even if it was the 9th anniversary and she got pregnant the same year they got married, that would mean that the kid was 9 in Rocky 4, so he should be 10 at the end of this movie.
Yep.
He is not 10.
He is not 10.
All right, what are you rating Rocky 5?
God, like I said, it's out of all the Rocky movies, I dislike it the most. And again, it's got good bones. It's got like a solid idea of what it wants to play with. I like the idea of a back to basics Rocky in concept, but everything that was presented to me on screen was just not what I was looking for. It just didn't deliver in any of the promises I feel like the rest of the Rocky franchise has made. So ultimately, I feel like this one, I'm thinking it's going to dip under the halfway mark, not by much, but I am thinking this is a 4.5 for me. I just don't think it's. This is exactly the type of movie that, having not seen Rocky Balboa, I would be totally fine with Rocky Balboa saying, remember those first 4 movies, and then just never talking about the 5th. Because it doesn't accomplish anything that's that noteworthy.
I don't remember how much Balboa or anything that comes after references directly from 5. If there is anything, it'll be minor.
Okay.
But of course, now I've said that, maybe there'll be a monologue in the halfway through the movie. Dad, remember that time when I got mad at you for really liking that Tommy character?
Dad, remember the time you held up the picture of my French teacher with the boobs hanging out and you just didn't say anything at all about that?
Yes. What they don't show you is that between movies, when he took his son to go see Titanic in 1997, and the line "Draw me like one of your French girls" came up, Rocky went, "Oh, my boy knows all about that."
In the fully crowded theater, as everyone else is like enraptured in the movie, he's just like, "Hey, that guy's my son." He's just like, "Remember you drew the naked teacher? Remember that?"
Oh dear. Yeah, it's a 4 for me. Like, it's not like complete and utter disastrous trash at the bottom of the the scale, but it is a bad movie. It's under the halfway line. So much of what's in it just does not work. It's kind of dull to watch. It's kind of a miserable movie, at least early on when you come down from the feeling from the end of 4. So
I like the idea that he convinced the entire Russian government to stop the Cold War, and yet like nobody in the American government is willing to back him up on a few loans.
The irony is that by the time this movie came out, the Cold War had actually ended.
Yeah, that's true.
That's quite funny to think about.
Maybe that's what it was. Like, the Soviet government wasn't letting the news get out to America of, like, he stopped the Cold War, so they had to make up this whole thing about the Berlin Wall coming down real quick. The Rocky universe is just ever so slightly different from ours.
Just in little ways. Rocky's responsible for a lot of things. So yeah, that is our thoughts on Rocky 5. We have one more Rocky movie to do. That'll be next week, of course, so we'll join us for that.
Before you move on to the end, does it make the cut?
Oh no, obviously not.
What? You don't want this DVD Blu-ray gracing your shelf?
Nope.
All right, fair enough. I'm not gonna fight you. Is it just cut from the collection? I feel like that's fair. I don't think it's all the way at like cut your losses or anything like that.
I think it's bordering on cut your losses. It's kind of I think it's teetering on there.
Okay. I mean, I think it's solidly in cut from the collection, but if you think it's lower, so be it.
It's. I don't know how passionately I feel about putting it in that tier, but it's just kind of like this is an infamously like the bad one of a franchise, and notably it's in a franchise where I don't think the quality ever dips anywhere near this across the board. So I mean, I haven't seen Creed 3 yet, so I mean, maybe I'll feel quite badly about that, but yeah, I would say it's a higher tier. Cut your losses.
Cut your losses. How passionately do I agree? I'm willing to give it the cut your losses, but that's only from the viewpoint of like, I think even Rocky fans, like that's the one thing is a lot of times I could say fans of the franchise might actually get something out of this. I don't think a lot of Rocky fans would like this either. I think that this is something that like everyone is kind of agreed on of, nah, it's just not that great.
Yep. So there you go. So like I said, Rocky Balboa next week. And I did mention, of course, earlier that you can get bonus shows from me and David over on Patreon, as well as bonuses for Screams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast that I do with Tim. Me and David also do Atomic Cinema Experiment, the sci-fi movie podcast, if you haven't checked that out. Lots of interesting movies there. But we also have our Patreon shows, which is includes the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. And we also have Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst movies of all time. Possibly one day, the Da Vinci Co-Ed. So if that sounds like something you would be entertained by.
Just to be clear, that one's on the Criterion show, right?
No, that's very much an Extra Reels.
Oh, okay.
Very much an Extra Reels. I mean, I kid, but it sounds like a candidate, to be honest.
I mean, I would love to know whether or not it's worth that, but it doesn't even have a rating on IMDb as far as I can tell. Nope, there it is, 4.6. Not great.
Yeah. If it was 3.6, that'd be not great, not terrible. That's your Chernobyl reference for the day. But yes, so go check out the bonus stuff. Also worth mentioning, I won't mention it every time I bring up Patreon. But if you are signing up, don't do it using the Apple app on iPhone. You can still use that app if you want to access your account. But when you're setting up your account and setting your payment, do it via any other method, because Apple will inflate the price, because they've put in a new rule, so it'll add 30% onto every price. So just set it up somewhere else, and then you can use it on the iPhone if you want afterwards.
Yeah, we say the $3 and the $5 tier. We mean it. We want you to pay that much. Don't pay more.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't mind if it was coming to us, but it doesn't come to us. It just goes to Apple.
Pete, come on. We're united front here. We don't want you to pay more.
I stand by what I said. So yes, that is the show. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.